Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to the first edition of a brand new review series where I am going to be talking about Daredevil Born Again Season 1, and today I am going to be talking about the Season 1 premiere, Episode 1, Heaven's Half Hour, which I have just finished watching. And first of all, I just want to say that after 7 years, it is really good to be having a brand new Daredevil series. I was a huge fan of the Netflix show. I saw all 3 seasons. They were some of the best television / storytelling I have ever seen, and it was just incredible. And I was absolutely bummed out when Daredevil got cancelled. But this has been a long time coming. You know, this has been 7 years in the making to get to this point. And, you know, Charlie Cox, for me, is what Robert Downey Jr. was to Iron Man. He is Daredevil / Matt Murdock. He is the man. I cannot think of anybody else who can play that character but him. He is the definitive live-action depiction of Daredevil / Matt Murdock. And it's been a slow build to get back to this point. You know, throughout the MCU, Matt Murdock has been making the rounds, making little guest cameo appearances. Spider-Man No Way Home, She-Hulk, Echo, and finally, after all that, he was finally given the green light. Daredevil is back in a brand new series called Born Again. Now, you can kind of look at this as Season 4, but they don't bill it as Season 4. So this still carries on from the original Netflix shows, but it's a brand new series. So it's not a case of they've just completely disregarded and ignored everything that's happened before, which they haven't. It's just more or less like a continuation. So look at it like, take for example, X-Men 97. X-Men 97 was a brand new show, but just picked up where it left off from the end of the original 90s show. It's kind of the same thing here with Daredevil Born Again. And after watching the first episode, my God, got absolute chills. Everybody's back, well, more or less. This was a fantastic episode. Not much in the way of action, but sometimes lack of action can be a good thing. This was more heavy storytelling, more building up things, laying down the foundations, and setting the tone for what this new Daredevil series is going to be all about. I'm very pleased that they kept the brutality and violent nature of the original Netflix shows that made Daredevil so incredible. And I feel like Daredevil Born Again has taken that brutality to the next level. So they've done a really good job there keeping that brutality. They haven't toned anything down, which is good. And from the best I can tell, it looks like the main story arc for Daredevil Born Again Season 1, it looks like they're going to be doing the Mayor Fisk story arc. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with that story arc. This was about Wilson Fisk coming out of prison, turning over a new leaf, and running a campaign to become mayor of the city, which of course spells bad news for all of the street level vigilantes. So you have Kingpin in office, much like Lex Luthor as president, you know it's bad news for everyone. Now, of course, the city are 50-50. Half are like, hooray, we want Wilson Fisk as mayor. The other half is like, no, we want no part of that guy. And you can imagine for someone like Matt Murdock, this is literally hell on earth. He's from Hell's Kitchen, so you can imagine how he feels about this. This is literally his worst nightmare coming true. Kingpin as the mayor. But as time goes on, we're going to see this story arc play out. But it looks like they're definitely going with the whole Mayor Fisk story arc, which was a big thing in the comic books. So I'll be very interested to see how they'll do that. But this was excellent stuff. Really kept me on the edge of my seat, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I've missed Daredevil in his own show, and I hoped and prayed we would get it, and this was definitely well worth the wait. 7 years in the making, everyone, and I can honestly tell you, after watching the first episode, it was amazing. So let's get straight into it. So we're going to start by talking about episode 1, Heaven's Half Hour. So this episode starts off with Matt Murdock, Foggy Nelson, and Karen Page going to Josie's bar to hang out. So they've just finished another shift at their law firm, which they helped set up back at the end of season 3. And we see Nelson is talking business with Kristen McDuffel while Cherry celebrates his retirement from the New York Police Department. And they mention about a new vigilante running around in New York City. And then Nelson receives a phone call from Benny, whom he hid at his place after helping him out. And he's now being harassed by someone. Nelson tries to calm him down and says that Benny is just being paranoid, but Murdock overhears with his ultrasonic hearing that Benny is in danger and rushes off to check on him, which Nelson did not want to happen. So it looks like, Daredevil has been out of the game for quite a while. He's been on like some sort of hiatus, so to speak. So we haven't seen much of Daredevil, if that's what we're led to believe. So we see Matt Murdock puts on his costume, becomes Daredevil, heads over, and hears that Benny is apologising to Nelson, admitting that he told the attacker where to find him. Daredevil rushes back, but doesn't get to the bar in time as Nelson is assassinated by Bullseye in front of a terrified Karen Page. See, I was really shocked about this. We are now 10 to 15 minutes in already, and they've already killed off Foggy Nelson. I was so upset about this. I just couldn't believe that they actually would do that. I thought maybe they could have saved that for, the season finale. Because this episode, even though it was fantastic, this really felt like a season finale. It really did. Foggy getting killed at the beginning. Boy, this show has already set the tone and wasn't going to be taking any prisoners. So we see Daredevil and Bullseye have this massive fight in the bar with gas going off and knives getting thrown at Daredevil. It was a fight. I mean, if anyone remembers their big fight at the end of season 3, this is pretty much that, but taken to the extreme. These guys really were out to kill each other. So Paige is trying to help Nelson, but eventually he succumbs to his wounds and he dies, much to Daredevil's utter horror, and he loses control, beats Bullseye down to a bloody pulp, and throws him off the rooftop. Wow. And we see him sitting there on the rooftop. He takes off his mask, throws it off, and it's just a teary mess. And Cherry spots him in the Daredevil gear, and by this point, Matt doesn't even care that someone has seen him as Daredevil. He's just lost his best friend, and he's an absolute wreck. What a way to start a new Daredevil series. Don't get me wrong, I'm upset Nelson's dead. Not happy about that, but boy, if this show was out to make a statement that they're back, then they've done a good job of that, because this was absolutely horrific. So now this takes place 1 year later, and Nelson, Murdoch, and Paige has disbanded. Karen has moved out of New York. Matt Murdock has pretty much retired Daredevil for good, and he's now set up a new law firm with McDuffie, and yeah, pretty much everyone's moved on, really, since Foggy died. And we see Matt Murdock heads to the courtroom to testify at Poindexter's trial, saying that no matter what verdict that is delivered, there will be no justice, since it would not bring Nelson back. And we see Poindexter is sentenced to life in prison, and he's done. He's basically gone down for life. Didn't show any remorse whatsoever. And we see Murdoch is talking to Paige, who has returned from San Francisco for the trial. Both of them are not happy with how their relationship ended, and Murdoch admits that he cannot be Daredevil anymore, as he let the worst happen. He let his best friend get killed. So, it's kind of like that whole Batman thing, where Jason Todd dies and Batman retires. So it's kind of like that. And then we see Wilson Fisk is back, a lot more slimmer. So he's put a lot of muscle on, so he's a lot more leaner. He's still a big guy, still a powerhouse, but he's slimmed down a lot. And he's decided to completely distance himself from his crime, his past, and his whole criminal empire that he had as the Kingpin. And we see that his wife, Vanessa, has more or less taken over the business. And we see that she's meeting up with 5 criminal families. And that whole meeting completely falls apart when Fisk shows up and everyone clears the room. And we see Fisk is opening up to Vanessa about his experience of self-rebuilding. And he tells her that he can do a lot of good for the city, but he needs to sever all of the connections to his criminal underworld that he once had. And Vanessa says that she put a lot of effort into solidifying their empire, but Fisk lets her know that he collected enough signatures to join the race to become mayor. It's interesting, because although they're still married, they're kind of like on the opposite sides now. So Vanessa is now running the criminal business, and Wilson now wants to become mayor of the city. So it's kind of interesting that they're both together but on different sides now. Whereas before, Fisk was running the show and Vanessa was like the loyal wife. My, a lot has changed. So we see Fisk has publicly declared his candidacy with his platform, clearing of New York City of vigilantes, blaming them all for misfortunes that the city has been facing. And we see that several people like Sheila Riveri and Buck Cashman have been helping Fisk with his campaign, although some are concerned about his unconventional approach. Blake chimes in, assuming that the campaign is going in the right direction and that Fisk is awesome and really putting him over the top, although Fisk is unamused by Blake's over-eagerness. And Fisk questions how could a person like Blake be on his team, but Riviera points out that he does not take much and has collected a lot of signatures for his candidacy. And we also see Matt Murdock is deeply troubled when he finds out about Fisk's campaign, hearing people on the streets being divided on whether or not to support him. We hear some are for him, some are against him, others are satisfied with how things are going to be, some are not happy with how things are going to be. And then on McDuffie's tip, Murdoch meets up with Heather Glenn, thinking that she's a new client, but it was really more or less therapy. But then they actually do go out on the date, and they actually ended up getting along, regardless of how Matt felt about the date. So it's cool to see that as well. And then back at the office, Murdoch chides that McDuffie for setting her up like that, but she's not sorry and guesses that he will be seeing Glenn again. Matt talks to Cherry, who works as his investigator at their firm, telling Murdoch that a lot of police officers seem ready to support Fisk. However, Fisk's campaign seems to be founded through fully legitimate channels with some investment from his wife, and Murdoch knows Fisk too well to accept it, but thinks that if he does get elected, then Fisk could be the mayor that the city deserves. We shall see. Fisk advances his campaign, chewing his opponents for their propositions to merely regulate the vigilante activity, while Fisk is adamant on getting rid of them completely. Murdoch meets up with Fisk at Square Diner, and this is where things really get good. So we see Matt Murdock and Wilson Fisk sitting down in the diner, having coffee, catching up on their old lives. Fisk is saying, "It's not entirely unpleasant to see you again." And Matt says, "Likewise." And Fisk goes on to say, "You've come up in the world since we last met, Murdoch." And Matt says, "I could say the same about you. Like you've lost weight." And it was just unbelievable. The tension, I thought any second now it's going to break down. And we see Fisk claims that he's kept his end of the bargain, that they struck the deal in the past, and he said he had nothing to do with Dexter's attack on Nelson, and he's sorry for his loss. And Murdoch wonders if Fisk is really gaming the system to win the election. Fisk, of course, denies this and said that his goal is to make New York City a better future. Fisk then asks Murdoch why did he stop being Daredevil, to which he responds by saying that he nearly crossed the line by killing Point Dexter, as he felt he lost the privilege, which Fisk, of course, understands and respects. Murdoch says he is willing to give Fisk the benefit of the doubt if he is truly a changed man, but if he intervenes just once, he will be there. Fisk claims that Murdoch did enjoy hurting Point Dexter, and adds that once he becomes mayor, he will drive all vigilantes out of the city, so Murdoch would have to stay in line as well. Ooh, good stuff here. So the two end their conversation amicably, and we see Murdoch goes on another date with Glenn, and he hears that Fisk has now won the election and has become the mayor. Murdoch tells Glenn that he has a history with Fisk, as the crowd of pro-Fisk voters celebrate on the streets. Fisk meets up with Vanessa, feeling distant from her, and says that he is aware that she has been cheating on him, and Vanessa asks him not to kill her lover, to which Fisk says, "I'm not that person anymore, and I won't go after him." Yeah, we'll see about that. And we see Murdoch shares a kiss with Glenn before she goes home. Murdoch remains on the streets as everyone is celebrating in support of Wilson Fisk becoming the mayor. And then we see at the rooftop, right at the end, Wilson Fisk looking over the city, almost like he's looking right down at Matt Murdoch, and Matt Murdoch is looking up as this episode ends. And that wraps up my review on episode 1, Heaven's Half Hour. Fantastic episode, great way to kick off Daredevil Born Again Season 1. Not much Daredevil here, We saw him at the beginning, but this was still excellent. And that just shows you how strong of a character Daredevil really is. You don't even need to have Matt Murdock in the suit to tell a good story. And this episode did exactly that. It told a good story, and you didn't even need the man in the suit. That is a testament to how strong the writing is and how strong and powerful the character is. To do that, to tell the story without even showing the costume throughout most of this episode was excellent. And now that Wilson Fisk is the mayor, that spells bad news for everyone, especially Matt Murdock. But I loved it. It's already got me excited for episode 2. I can't wait. This has been everything that I hoped and then some. I can't wait to see what happens. It's going to be a crazy and wild ride. Let's go. So anyway, that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What did you guys think of episode 1, Heaven's Half Hour? Did you enjoy it? How did you feel about Foggy Nelson getting killed off? Was you upset about it? Do you think it was a bit too soon? How do you feel about Wilson Fisk becoming the mayor? What's his plan? What's he up to? What's his agenda? Is this bad news for all of the vigilantes, and especially Matt Murdock? And also, what about Matt Murdock giving up being Daredevil? Do you think he really has hung up his billy club for good? Do you think we will see him put on the suit again? And how long will it be before Matt Murdock falls out of line and is in the crosshairs of the Kingpin? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Daredevil Born Again Season 1 review series, where I'm going to be talking about episode 2, which I am really pumped to see, especially with the way this episode went down. It's going to be epic. I can't wait. So until next time, take care everybody and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.